Okay, so sorry about the delayed start. You guys got me off on tangents. Such is life. Apparently I like to talk or something like that. Anyway, so we have two things. We're going to continue on with our building of things that are scripted for you, and I'm going to walk you through that. We're going to use tubes and sweeps and stuff, and I'll walk you through all of that. But you also got a handout for your first assignment. And I give and you guys will see this in this class, compared to 135. 135, you get like an assignment and it's due like a week later or 2 weeks later at max. This one, if you look at the due date, it's not until September 25th. So you've got quite a ways going out because you have to build up a lot of skills in the process. However, you're getting to the point now where you have some of the skills needed to start modeling it. So you can think about and conceive, this is what I'm going to do as my furniture, this is what I think I want my chair to look like, that sort of thing. And you can start on it. Then when we get to materials and texture mapping, you can apply that skill to the material, to your object itself. So what I try to do is I try to build over the next month, so to speak. You're going to be getting all the skills you need to finally do it. And we'll end with doing organic shapes and cloth and that sort of thing. How do you model that? So as we go along, you can keep adding to this, as opposed to just waiting until the last minute and then panicking. So I'd like to at least give it to you in advance so you know this is where we're going, this is what we're going to be doing as we go forward. But I do want to point out that it's not due until the 25th. So you've got a ways to go before it's actually due. Okay? Do pay attention that I want, one, a print so that I have a physical copy of it just in case something were to happen, but also that I want 3 different renderings. And it's really important that you give me 3 renderings. And for whatever reason, last semester, I had a lot of people not actually read what I wanted. And so on these various, not so much in the first one, but later on, I'm not speaking directly to you. But when you didn't read that I want 3 renderings, or you didn't read that I want a night rendering and a day rendering, or whatever it is that's required as part of the assignment, people wouldn't turn those in, and then you'd be getting your grades back and you'd get like a 40% on the assignment because you just didn't turn in 2 of the required rendering. Or in this case, you turned in 1 rendering for this, suddenly you have a 33% best case. You know, maybe you have less than that. It's like a 25% or whatever because your rendering wasn't perfect or whatever. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. Give me all 3 to grade. Does that make sense? So I'd rather tell you that now to try to make sure that you read what I want. Okay? So anyway, we'll get to that. So for today, we're going to work through doing some more interesting things in Rhino. Hopefully you'll learn something today as part of it. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Rhino. This is going to be a brand new Rhino file. I don't need the bridge just yet. We'll get to that a little bit later on. And I'm going to create a new large object inches as my template here. All right. Maybe not. Okay. Now we're loaded up. I'm going to start today in the top view. Somehow it's not showing me where I am, but that's okay. We'll start at 0, 0. I'm going to start with the polyline tool, and I'm going to draw the shape that's right next to part 1. There is, in this handout, a bunch of information. There's little images along the side, and then there's a bunch more information on the back. For whatever reason, sometimes people have trouble with the back drawing, understanding what's going on, but I'm going to build it in front of you anyway, so you'll see it that way as well. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to start at point 0, 0. So I'm going to go to my polyline tool here, and I'm going to start at point 0, 0. And let me zoom in so that I can see that. Perfect. And as I start to create this, essentially what I want is I want an arc that is a 2-inch by 2-inch arc. Then I'm going to go 13 inches, and then I'm going to do another 13 by 13-inch arc. Now the first thing that I want is an arc, not a line. So if we come up here and look in my command line, see how there's mode equals line? I can actually switch from mode equals line to mode equals arc, which can get me started here. And let me see, turn off ortho here for a second. And it's totally not helping me here because Arc direction. Okay, there we go. Let me go 2 inches here. Of course, I drew it wrong. Hold on a second. Sorry. I don't do this that often. So let me do a polyline again, 0, 0. I'm in arc mode. I want to choose my direction. It should be 2 inches this direction. Let me go 2 inches. And of course, it's being so not convenient for me. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to draw an arc the regular way. See, sometimes it doesn't work for me. So I'm going to come down here. Instead of the polyline tool, I'm going to use the arc tool. Center, start, and then my angle. So the center of my arc is going to be at 0, 2 inches. Sorry, 2, 0 inches. Clearly, I'm just off today. You guys clearly threw me off, right? So we'll start at 0, 0. And that was not what I wanted. Center of arc. It's like, time out, can we just pull a reset? Because nothing I'm doing is working, right? This is embarrassing. I should be able to model this really fast. Anyway, such is life. OK, so 2 at 2, 0. There we go. And we're going to go 2 inches back this way for the start of arc there. And we're going to go right up to 90 degrees. I don't know why that was so challenging, but anyway, it must be how you guys feel, right? OK, then I'm going to go back to my polyline tool, and I'm going to draw a line that goes across at 13 inches. Maybe. Why am I so off? Oh, mode, I need to be back to line. There we go. 13 inches. There we go. And let me do one more arc. There's my arc. My center is right there. Start and end. And there I have my arc. I want all of these to be joined together so that I end up with this as a continuous piece. So let me type join so that they're continuous like that. That was essentially what I was after to create, and it took me way too long to do that. I will do it again just so that it's a little bit clearer, hopefully. I'm going to start with my arc, and it doesn't really matter where I choose to do it. I did it at 0, 0. I'll do it up a little bit higher here. We'll do 0, 1 foot, and then let's say the start of arc will be at 2 inches there, like that. I'll draw a line that goes over 13 inches, like that. And I'll draw the end of the arc by using my smart tracking to get that center of the arc, start and end, like that. I'm going to go ahead and delete the second one because we don't need it. We only need the first one. I just wanted to go through how I went about doing it. So now that I have this shape, I need to get it in the third dimension. So I'm going to use rotate 3D as we've worked on before. So I'll switch into the perspective view. Let me zoom the extents of this object. There it is. And I will use rotate 3D, which is available under transform and then rotate 3D, or I can type rotate 3D. My axis of rotation is going to be along the bottom here. So we'll go straight along the bottom. I'm going to come out the side up the y-axis and flip this whole thing up 90 degrees. It's flipping to 90 degrees because I have ortho on. If I didn't have ortho on, you can hold down the shift key on the keyboard, and it'll jump to that 90 degrees for you as well. So essentially what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create this shape in the third dimension. So the arc that comes up and comes back down over. I already joined these together, so it's all one continuous curve. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a circle that is the diameter of the tube that I'm creating. So essentially what I'm creating here is a pipe, a tube of surface. So I'm going to use my circle tool, and I'm going to go right to the center right there. And what I want is I want my diameter to be set at 1/2 inch. So by default, a lot of times your circle is in radius. So if it is in radius, it's asking for a radius, I need to specify that this radius is in fact 0.25 inches instead of 0.5. Or I could click on the D for diameter, convert to diameter, in which case it would be 0.5. So there's my radius. So now I have a circle and I have this curving line. I'd like essentially for this circle to be a cross-section of the tube that I'm creating on this particular surface. So to do that, I'm going to use a command called sweep1 or sweep one rail. And it's available under the surface menu. It's the third one down, sweep one rail. Or you can type sweep 1. I'll tell you what sweep 2 is in just a second. And essentially what it says first is select the rail. The rail is going to be the curve that you want to follow along. And then it's going to ask me for the cross-sectional curve, which is that circle right there. When I hit enter, it's going to ask me for where the seam should be. The default is perfectly fine. I'll hit enter one more time. And we can then see a preview mode of that, essentially that tube that followed along my line. We're going to leave it as uniform or as freeform. Let me do it one more time. I'll go to Surface, Sweep One Rail. There's my rail. There's my cross-section curve. There's my seam. The options here for right now, we're going to leave it as freeform. That's great. We're not going to simplify it, and we're going to go ahead and say OK on those options. And essentially what this does is it allows us to create a tube or essentially anything with a cross-section as a surface, and we can follow along another curve. So for example, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to create a new curve here. We'll do it off in space. Turn off ortho for a second. You guys don't have to do this. I'm just doing this as an example of what this will do. OK, so essentially I created like a little curve that loops up and around like that. I can take any cross-sectional curve. So in this case, we could do it with another circle. I'll do that one first. And let me rotate 3D on it. Okay, something like that. And I can do the sweep on this curve as well. So a sweep 1, my rail is that, my cross-sectional curve is this. Enter, there's my seam, and follow it along and create essentially any shape that I want by following along a particular curve. So in this case, it's again a little tube, but I don't have to have it as a circle. I can essentially use any shape that I want. So maybe instead I'll do a rectangle this time. Do a rectangle here. Fold it down like that. So there's a rectangle this time. I'm going to do the same thing here with this. Actually, that's going to be really large, so let me scale this really quick so it's not quite so big. And I'm going to do the sweep here. So sweep 1. There's my rail. There's my cross-sectional curve. And now twist that rectangle along the curve. So it doesn't matter what the cross-sectional shape is. It can be anything. We just have a rail and a cross-sectional shape, and it builds that out of it. There is a weird little pinch happening here where I've got the pieces overlapping. It's because they intersect. My curve is a little too sharp there for the size of this object. I want to also, though, explore a few other options relating to this. So let me scale this down one more time. I'm going to make this so that it's not quite so thick. And let's go ahead and scale this down a little bit too, like that. OK, so this time under sweep 1, same thing. There's my rail. There's my cross-sectional curve. In the options right here, we've been doing freeform, which is normal for like a pipe that follows along. But we can also use something called roadlike top. And what roadlike top does, if we preview it, is it keeps the top surface flat as we go through our particular shape. So there it is in practice. And notice that the top surface stays flat as if it were a road following along. We have a little bit of an issue. Like I said, my curve is a little too sharp right there. But I could fix those two pinches. And essentially, it looks more like a road. So it's a different way of orienting your surface as you do these sweeps. So the one other thing that I can do is instead of having one rail, I can have two rails. So let me take this curve and let me look at it in the top view for a second. Okay. Can't even type today. Let me figure out which ones need to move. I think it's this. Okay, so I was just creating a second set of curves there. I can use these two curves as two rails with one object between them. So let me do a quick scale of this object like that, and then I'm going to sweep this across both objects. So instead of being a sweep 1, it's a sweep 2, which is going to ask me for the first rail followed by the second rail. Notice I'm not pressing enter in between these. It just automatically moves to the next command. My cross-section curve will be here, and it will then create it. Now, in this case, the closer together the two curves are, the smaller the object. The further apart they are, the bigger the object gets. So the object size is going to vary based on where in this curve the object exists. So I like to at least point out that you can do a sweep 2 depending on what it is that you're trying to do. OK. All of that was side explanation. Let's go back to our object itself. So there's my object. I'm going to select it, and then Z followed by S for selected. So Z enter, and then S enter for selected. And I'm going to make two little buttons on the bottom of this shape. So I can do this either as a solid, or I can do it as an extrusion. The handout, I show it as an extrusion, but you can make it a cylinder too. I'm going to snap to the center right there. I'm going to switch over into diameter, and I say that the diameter is 1.5 inches, so I'll type 1.5 inches. There it is. So when I'll do it on this side, just so you can see it. OK, so here I am with my circle. I snap to the center. If you're in radius, you just click on where it says diameter, or you can type D for diameter, followed by enter. And we're going to specify a diameter of 1.5 inches, so same thing there. I actually don't need this one because I can copy it down the road. So now that I have that, I need to extrude this surface. So I'm going to type extrude curve, or I'll go up to surface, extrude curve straight, either way. And I do want to make sure here, just like we did when we did that building, that my extrusion is going to be solid. So solid is set to yes. And I'm going to set this extrusion at negative 0.25 inches. So I'm going to type negative 0.25 inches. The reason I'm typing negative is because I want it to go down. So there's my first one. I'm going to make a copy of this one that is 3/4 of an inch below the first button. It could be a 1/2 inch. That's fine, too. So let me copy it. Now, when I do this copy, notice that one of my options is, do I want to copy it vertically? And it says no right now. Well, I do, in fact, want to copy it vertically. So I'm going to turn vertical to yes. That's going to create a copy going down. So at this point, I will snap to this, and I'll go down negative 0.75 inches. When I do that, it leaves a 1/2 inch between the two, because I'm adding the 1/2 inch plus the 0.25 of the first button. And I'll go ahead and hit enter to finish. That then gives me these two pieces with an air space in between. Ultimately, we're going to hold a little glass panel in between. What we're making, I probably should show you this so that you can see it, is it's a glass clamp for a curtain wall of glass. So we're making something like this. There you go, like that. Okay, so we're going to have a glass panel. We're going to have a little cross-section piece. We're going to have two little buttons that clamp on either side of the panel, and we're going to create some a vertical rod and some additional tension cables and stuff. Okay, so that's essentially just so you know what we're kind of envisioning as we go forward. Anyway, so I've made those two little buttons. I'm going to copy those two little buttons over to this side. So I'm going to type copy, or I can go up to the transform copy. Select objects. It's going to be these two objects. I'm going to copy from the center of this circle over to the center of that circle. So I end up with those two buttons on either end. Now I want to rotate this by 45 degrees so it's going this direction. And it's kind of up to you whether you do the rotation first or the copy first. Either way works. I'm going to go ahead and take this and I'm going to rotate it. So I'll type rotate or just do a regular rotate, which is under transform and then rotate. And we're going to go from there to there. And I'm going to type in 45. And look how convenient. It lands right on the other 1 foot square. OK, so I have that. Now I need a copy of this going in the opposite direction. So I'm going to copy it. And we have two different options. And I'll show you how this works. The first one, I can copy it. I can move it over here, drop it somewhere. Then I can take it. I can rotate it. This time it would be by 90 degrees, so it's going in the opposite direction. And then I could move it. Oops. Move. Can't type today. Right back to there, which would give me that. The other option, though, is I could select it, and on the copy command, oops, there's an option for in place. Essentially, that makes a copy in the same place that the existing one is. So I can choose in place, and I can immediately, sorry, my mouse is sticking on these things, which is not helping me today. Copy, in place, there it is. It stays selected, and I can immediately go to the rotate from the middle here, and it's going to be 90 degrees, like that. So I don't actually have to place it somewhere, rotate it, and then move it back. But it's a little bit more advanced to do it in place, doing an in-place copy. But I will at least want to point that out to you, that it is an option. So now essentially I've made this little X with these little rods that are going to hold the various sides. And now it's time to make a vertical piece that extends out of the top of it. And this is where the drawing on the back will help us out a little bit. The vertical piece that we're creating from the surface of the glass is 2 feet tall. So I'm going to go ahead and create a line. It doesn't really matter. I can do it over here in space here. Let me turn on ortho for a second. That's 2 feet in that direction. I will then create a circle with a diameter of 0.5. So same diameter. I need that to rotate up. So it's perpendicular to my curve. So I'll rotate 3D. Start of rotation axis. And we'll fold it up. You guys can see why we spent time on rotate 3D, and now it shows up, and I keep using it over and over again. So now that I have this, I'm going to sweep this. So we'll go into curve, surface, sweep one rail. Rail first, followed by cross-section, enter, enter. Oh, sorry, this should be back to freeform. And I'll say OK. So there's my rod. Now I need to create a little donut on the end of this particular shape. So when I create the little donut on the end of this shape, the overall outside curve is 1 3/4 inches. So once again, its diameter 1.75 inches. There's the outside. The inside of this is 3/8, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, 3/8. So this time the diameter is 3/8 of an inch. Notice that's a little bit smaller. I'm doing this on purpose to force you into how these sweeps work. So now I need to make the donut. And certainly we could come over here into the primitives and actually use the torus, which is essentially a donut. And then we could go through, okay, there's the center, there's the outside, there's the inside, and we could create it that way. But I'm going to do it with a sweep, just since we're practicing the sweeps. So the first thing that I'll do is I'm going to create a circle. But instead of picking the radius and the center point, I'm going to use the second option over, which is just the diameter. I can do that and snap from right here straight across to right there, which gives me a circle that's in between those two circles. I'll then rotate 3D this circle to turn it up in plane. So let me go to rotate 3D. If I can type, which I can't today. Rotate 3D from there to there. And there we go. Now I'm going to sweep this around this. And one of the things that's important about a sweep is our cross-section doesn't have to be in the center of our rail. They can be offset from each other. So I could sweep one. Oops, sorry. Sweep one. Rail first. There's the outside curve. Cross-section curve right there. And it builds the little donut for me. We'll go ahead and say OK. So if you do it with the torus, that's fine. If you do it using the sweep, that's fine. Obviously, today I'm emphasizing sweep as something you should learn. So we do have a little problem here. We've got a little bit of this that's extending. This surface here is extending beyond my little torus. So we need to do some trim work. So I'll select this, type trim, or go to edit trim. And I'm just going to get rid of that part of the little donut there. I could take it further and get inside the little donut. Sorry, my mouse is sticking. It's driving me nuts here. I could get inside the little donut if I can. It's hard to see. And I could get rid of that piece, but it really doesn't matter. It's inside. So there it is. Now I just need to rotate this up in the third dimension. So let me select it. We'll go back to rotate 3D. So lots of rotate 3Ds today, lots of sweeps. So I'll go transform, rotate 3D. And we'll go axis of rotation, reference, and we'll fold it up right there. And now I need to move this object on top of my little piece here. So we'll go to move. And we'll drop it. If you're having trouble seeing where that midpoint is, you can switch your view into something called ghosted, which shows us kind of the insides of the objects. Sometimes that's helpful. I just like to point that out. Come back to shaded there. OK, so there's my little object. We need to take it a couple steps further. We need to create the glass panel. We need to create the little tension rod that's here as well. So let me go ahead and create a few more things. First thing will be just a regular box, corner to corner. Let me start at point 0, 0. I'm going to go out and say at 4 feet, 6 feet. And my thickness is going to be negative 0.5 inches. But it's not quite down far enough, so my positioning isn't quite right. I'm going to move this vertically, so I'm going to click on V for vertical here. And we're going to drop it down so it's actually there. And then I do want it to be moved out so that it's in the center. This conveniently is on a 1 foot square, so I can actually just move from right here to 6, 6, which would be right in the center of that. I could also double check it by looking down at it. And yep, it's all right in the center, which is where it should be. So now I have a little pane of glass that's part of this. The last thing is the little rod that goes up. And I'm going to do a curve, or excuse me, a polyline from the center, I hope. I'm going to turn on center snap. See if it'll let me get to the center. You turn off not. Sometimes you kind of have to work through that. There's center. We'll go off at 6 feet, which is the height of one of the panels. I then need to do a sweep of that. So there's my curve. Right there, let me do this, sweep 1. There's my curve. Perfect. Say OK. And there's that little piece of rod. So this piece, this little component, is kind of like the bridge. We built part of the wall. Long term, we'll be able to use this and array it out into a big wall. Let me just make sure I've gotten through everything. That was the modeling. OK, good. The last piece is to assign materials to this. And you guys all know that glass is not our friend, so we're going to do a little bit of a fake glass for right now. I want to rotate this up in the 3rd dimension, so I'll take this whole thing. I'm going to go to Rotate 3D along the glass panel here. There. We'll fold that up. And I'm also going to move this so that that point on my glass panel is at 0, 0, 0. That will help us when we bring it in as a block next class. So you do have to save this, and then we're going to work with it a little bit more. I need to go ahead and assign my materials to this. So we'll go into my V-Ray material editor, and you can see how the class builds on itself. And we're going to load in a few materials. First one will be metal for the little spider clamp. So I'll right-click and say Load Material, and I'll go find some metal on my flash drive. I'll go into Resources, V-Ray. We'll go into metal if I can find it. There it is. We'll do a brushed metal. And I want that to be assigned to this clamp. It would probably be helpful if I arranged my layers just a little bit. So let's make layer 2 the metal clamp. I'm then going to select all of that. I'll right-click on metal clamp and say Change Object Layer. Now that's all on metal clamp. My glass I will also put on its own layer. So we'll rename layer 3 to be glass. And I'll right-click and say Change Object Layer. Just kind of cleans things up a little bit. It also lets me easily turn on and turn off various pieces of this. So let's turn off the glass for just a second. All of this needs to be assigned to metal. So I'll go to my materials. I'll right-click on Brush Metal, if my right-click will work on my mouse. This is really annoying. There we go. Apply Material to Selection. And now I said for the glass we were going to have some challenges. And so the glass, the easiest way to see the glass is to create a new material. So I'm going to create a standard material. I'm going to make the color of that material kind of a light blue-ish color, maybe something like that. And then I'll change the transparency of the material to be kind of a mid-value gray, which is going to make kind of a bluish glass like that, something like that. I will then assign that. We'll name it glass, and I'll assign that to my selection. And then we'll do a render, and I'll do that in a second. The problem with real glass is that we have no environment context. So it's never going to look that good, or it's going to show up as completely transparent, in which case you won't see it. So for right now, doing a kind of a temporary glass with just a little bit of transparency, that'll work for what we need to do. Before I do the render, I'm going to go into my V-Ray options, and I'm going to go to Environment, and I'm going to change my background from black to be white. And then I'll go ahead and do a render. And it will probably be very light, but technically I can see that. The metal isn't turning out that great because it's reflecting so much of the white in it. But this is enough for what we're trying to do. You do need to post the image of the final render today. And by the way, if you want to try one of the glass, you can of course try one of the other glass materials. If I were to load material, let me go into glass here. The skyscraper light might be OK, although we don't technically have a environment yet, but let me apply material to selection and let's see if that one works. Yeah, there you go. There's the example where it just doesn't show. We don't have any clouds. We have nothing to really see with it yet. And that's the inherent nature of glass. But it's a good exercise to go through and to have to make these parts. Once you're done, make sure you save this. You will need this file next class, just like the concrete you'll need next class. Okay, so make sure you save this piece as well. The instructions should all be here. I'm not overly worried if the dimensions are off a little bit. It's okay. The idea is to get really comfortable with these sweeps and to be able to make these kinds of objects using a sweep. Are there any questions? No? Yeah. So when I did the little spider here, I just used a copy to create a second copy of it, and then I used a regular rotate to rotate it. And when you rotate it, because one of them's already at 45, you can do 90. So the first one, you rotate to 45, copy it, take the second one, rotate it 90 more, so 135 total, and then move it back on top of the other one. A light shining on it? You can if you want, but you don't have to. We're just looking for modeling. When we put it into a scene, I'm going to talk a lot about blocks and stuff next class. That's when we'll start to create some environment.